Bord Gáis Energy, proud sponsors of the GAA All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship and GAA Legends Tour Series of Croke Park. Hashtag hurling to the core.
Hello and welcome to the throw-in with me, Michael Verney, in association with Bord Gáis Energy. Will is off this week, but I'm joined by Brendan Cummins and John Mullane to discuss all the weekend's hurling action. We'll also hear from Clerkin and Martin Breheny on the Ulster and Leinster football finals later in the show. But first, the hurling. John, you must have been delighted that Waterford finally put the Tip Demons to bed at the weekend.
Yeah, well, look, I suppose it's 13 years since we beat Tipperary, 2008. Long time coming, and in that time, I think we've played them 8 times, lost 7, drew once. So I think, if ever there was going to be a time we were going to put it to bed, Saturday was the time. Everything was with us, with momentum. The team are playing unbelievable hurling. The running game was always going to trouble Tipperary. And then the flip side of that, you're coming up against a Tipperary team who, some unbelievable hurlers of the past 20 years, probably age profile was against them. So everything was stacked in Waterford's favour. But they still had to go and deliver, for an awful lot of these Waterford players, and all of these Tipperary players have had the Indian side over this team. So they still had to go and deliver, and they delivered in bucket loads the weekend. But great credit has to go to Tipperary, the way they battled to the end. And some of those players, they owe Tipperary nothing. And, I'm not trying to retire any Tipperary lads, but if it is to be their last game, as Liam Sheedy, alluded to, they died with their boots on the weekend, and I don't think they owe Tipperary hurling anything.
Brendan, we'll chat a bit more about Tipperary in a minute, but just a word on Waterford. Obviously, kind of a mixed league campaign. Obviously, you had a win over Limerick and a win over Tipperary in the last round. Probably a very, very flat performance against Clare. Probably flat enough against Laois. They've turned their season around unbelievably well. And now you'd have to say they're going into an All-Ireland semi-final. Fair enough, there'll be a bit of fatigue because of the amount of weeks in a row that they've played. But they have turned the season around seriously and have put themselves in with a great shout going into the semi-final stage.
They have, and I would agree to a point. I the only time I think the Waterford were flat was the Clare game. I think they targeted Limerick and they targeted Tipperary in the league, and every other game didn't matter. Right, so they're the ones they wanted to go well in, and they did that. And the Laois game, they had a huge amount of training done the week of the Laois game. They had to load up on training. It was the only opportunity they were probably going to get. So if you think of the mindset of Liam Cahill, it's about the size of the fight and the dog. So to do that, you have to push fellas to the absolute limit in training and nearly break them, right? And when then you play a match that Sunday or Saturday, whenever they played Laois, they were lucky to get across the line, but they still got across the line. But he was more looking at round 2 qualifier, All-Ireland quarter-final. And you saw the explosive power that Waterford had. The third quarter of the game against Tip, and they just absolutely blew him away. It looked exactly like Limerick is the biggest compliment I can give Waterford. And then they faded in the last quarter, which is something that's a worry with 4 weeks in a row. When Waterford are humming and absolutely flying, they're playing the modern brand of hurling, wing backs attacking. Shane Bennett, his sweeper, ends up on the opposition 21, trying to get on an overlap. They have full flow of hurling. The issue for them really now is that they may need to manage it as best they can to finish the game as strong at the end as they do at the start, which isn't easy going in to play the All-Ireland champions. But when they were in full flow the weekend, they were seriously, seriously impressive, the way they worked the ball, the way they flowed, and the way they trust each other. I think Michael Duigan was on commentary. He said that, it was an error of Waterford running the ball up the pitch, the Tip got the goal. That may be the case, but that won't stop Waterford from still trying to run the ball. If you take it in there was only a minute and a half left in the game when Tip got the last goal chance, and Waterford out under the high covered stand trying to run the ball from the corner back position, and they got turned over. But that's unbelievable bravery. And John said it there. That's what it takes to win All-Ireland, and that's what impressed me the most about Waterford. They have a process. They're going to stick to it. They're not going to lamp the ball up the pitch just because they're tired. And that's all credit to Liam Cahill and a bunch of players that he has down there who bought in completely of what they're trying to do. And that's why Waterford in All-Ireland final last year, and they're a strong chance of getting to one again this year.
But go back to that Clare game, right? Conor Prunty wasn't full back. Barron wasn't playing. Ozzy was back in the half-back line. Kieran Bennett wasn't playing. Patrick Curran wasn't playing. So the whole dynamic of the team, Peter Hogan wasn't playing. So the whole dynamic of the team is after changing. Prunty is back in. He was a colossal there the weekend after a slow start. Barron is playing incredible hurling. Peter Hogan is playing incredible hurling. I think Ozzy now, I think the penny is dropped now. Up number 14, playing that free role. That's his position. That's his position now. And I think the forward division are more comfortable knowing that they have Ozzy up top. Shane Bennett has gone back centre back. Probably brings a totally different dynamic to the team in regards, I would say, well, who's going to replace the Burke? But Shane Bennett is attacking from centre back. Kieran Bennett wasn't playing. He's attacking from wing back. So they've pace coming all over the field. They can hurt you from all over the field. And the one thing that is going to trouble this Limerick team, and if any team is going to have a chance or a hope of taking this Limerick team down, it's a running game, running at them. We seen it last year in the Munster final, right? They never got the running game going in the All-Ireland final. We seen it in the Munster final last year when Waterford ran at them. The concession of frees that were conceded again Limerick. We've seen it in stages of the Cork game when Cork ran at them. They had him in all sorts of bother. Tipperary, probably ran out of steam, probably didn't have the legs. So I think Waterford are going into this match in a really, really, really good place. Energy, pace, and everything is with them to go and have a right crack and try and take this Limerick team down.
Just a word, John, as well. Your bench impact is probably even greater than last year. You had Neil Montgomery coming in, making a massive difference. Mikey Kiley, who's only a young fella, I think he's still under 20. You probably have kicked on a bit more. You probably do have more options even than last year.
But again, Verney, what's coming off the bench? You're replacing pace, or you're replacing speed with speed, right? Montgomery, speed. Darragh Lyons, speed. Billy Power, speed. Dunford, speed. And Michael Kiley, speed. So you're taking off 5 lads and you're replacing them with another 5 lads that have speed. So a lot of these lads, for me, the young song hero of this team is Jack Pendergast. I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. This man he's run himself into the ground. He typifies what this team is all about, and I think if you were to ask Liam Cahill, who's the one player that you put on your team sheet from the start, you write down number 1, I would say he's definitely in your top 3. So he knows his job. Jack Pendergast knows his job, right? I'm going to go at it. I'm going to kill myself for 50, 55 minutes. Jack Fagan knows the same, and now we know when Conor Gleeson comes back, he have a headache now. Will he start Conor Gleeson? Won't he start Conor Gleeson? Because Shane McNulty was excellent. So, he has serious options. But going into this weekend, the one key thing for me is Cian Lynch. Who's gonna tie down Cian Lynch? Shane Bennett, will he be able to play that type of centre back role that he's played the last 2 games? I don't know, because someone's going to have to, someone in that back line is going to have to sacrifice their game to go and try and tie down Cian Lynch. Because as we seen last year, 2 years ago, you go back to when Kilkenny played Limerick, the last time Limerick were beaten. Conor Brown he was given a sole job. Mark Cian Lynch, took Cian Lynch out. I think that's the last time Cian Lynch was possibly marked out of a game. I mean, that's remarkable. We're going on nearly 2 years now. So I think someone is going to have to be deployed within that Waterford back line, whether it be Caelan Lyons, could possibly be Shane Bennett. Will Conor Gleeson come back and be designated that role? But someone's going to have to tie down Cian Lynch for Waterford to win this match the weekend.
A lot of interesting conundrums ahead. Just from a Tipperary point of view, Brendan, obviously John mentioned there about some of the elder statesmen, the likes of Paddy Maher, Brendan Maher, Noel McGrath, Seamus Callanan, and even Liam Sheedy's 3-year term is up. What do you see 2022 looking like for Tipperary? Do you expect a new manager at the helm, do you expect a lot of those elder statesmen to still be there?
I think it's hard to know. It'll depend. If Liam feels he's got the energy and the time, I suppose, because obviously he's got a seriously high role with tenure that he can give another 2 to 3 years, then I think he will be the one who'll get the job. There's always a natural attrition on players, and again, it's just the evolution of it. So I don't want to be, I suppose, prompting retirements on this of lads, because I remember when I was playing and I used to hear people saying, Cummins is finished, he should go. I was going, I'll tell you one thing, and you'd be going mad after all the work you'd have done, right? But there is, and it's natural, but Tipperary will need to change. Not massive open heart surgery on the team. I think 4 or 5 spots around the place, a couple of freshness in, running the ball. Like, it wasn't as if Tipperary, there was passes they play, especially in the third quarter when Waterford got a flow and got a run on Tip. But you look at the last quarter, like Tipperary were 10 points to 4 up in that last quarter and missed a goal chance. Right now, they missed 3, but one in particular, the John McGrath's one. John McGrath 2 or 3 years ago puts that in the net, and everybody says, Waterford were good, but they just faded in the finish, didn't they? The usual story with Waterford, if that hit the back of the net. Whereas it's an unbelievable save from Sean O'Brien. They go up the field, Montgomery scores, Waterford score another 2 points, and it's Waterford have routed Tipperary. So there was a real fine margin for all of the punches that were landed by Waterford, for all the running, for all the honest endeavour they put in. And don't get me wrong, they were fantastic on the day. It was still that save that kept them pretty much in the hunt, right? So from a Tip positive point of view, it means I'm not that far off. Like Mark Keogh came on, Dylan Quirk is there, Young Connolly is there. He's got unbelievable legs as well. He's a Calum Lyons kind of a wing back if he got a little bit more confidence into him, which he will do. So it's not all panic for Tipperary, but there is change, and there'll have to be, from players. And management will be a key decision now in the coming weeks. I'm sure Liam will tell all in the coming months as to what he's going to do. And then Tip County Board then can go about trying to find a replacement if that's the case. Or Liam can stay in situ and find those younger players, because we won 2 All-Ireland under-20s not that long ago.
Yeah, definitely interesting. You talked about change there. Cork is probably a county where a lot of change happened over the winter with maybe some retirements and a lot of new blood brought in. John, there, I know you said it, I think it was a qualifier preview in your independent column a couple of weeks ago, and I think they were 16-1 at the time, and you kind of fancied them to have a good chance of getting to in around an All-Ireland final. They're motoring really well now and have 2 big wins under their belt as well.
They do, but you look at the teams that are left. Limerick moved the ball with pace through the lines. Waterford likewise. Cork likewise, an abundance of speed. And look, Kilkenny are Kilkenny, and look, Kilkenny are adapting to the modern game. And Cork, they have the players. They have serious talent. You go through their team: Darragh Fitzgibbon midfield, Luke Meade, who's complimenting him there. Robbie O'Flynn, speed to burn, Jack O'Connor. It's just ridiculous how fast this guy is. Horgan is Horgan. Harnedy is bringing the experience. There's a couple of lads coming off the bench, and they seem to be tightening up things at the back. And I did say if they got into Croke Park that they would be dangerous, and I think Croke Park will actually suit them. They came through a titanic battle with Clare, got over the line. They probably brought a couple of qualities that we didn't see before from within a Cork team, and I think Brendan touched on it on the Sunday game last night. And Brendan touched on it last night. They got the job done, and they done a professional job last night or Saturday night against the Dogs. And here they are now. They're in a semi-final. They're playing against Kilkenny. And I think they'll fancy beating Kilkenny, and they'll feel that they have the legs, they have the speed, they have the hurlers to take down this Kilkenny team the weekend.
Brendan, a lot of people would be focusing at the Cork forward line, but I know you said it last night about the Cork need to get angry. There's probably an anger that needs to come all over the pitch, but there's definitely seems to be a lot more steel in their defence now. I think they have a lot more probably dedicated man markers, the likes of Jeremy Elric and even Niall O'Leary and a couple of others that can kind of nullify guys. They've only conceded 3 goals in this year's championship, 1 a game maybe, compared to they were conceding far bigger scores last year. is it at the back where really that foundation is set while they do all the nice things up front? If they can keep that kind of steeliness and solidness at the back, they will be they're going to be hard beaten if they can keep that.
Yeah, they will. I think Downey, Cahalane, in fairness, was doing full back, but he was doing fine and surviving. I think what Downey gives him in there is athleticism. Remember Hugh Lawler, what he did in the Leinster final. The modern fullback now needs to always have pace, be strong, be good on the ball. And there's sometimes a freshness can be brought to it when you put a new guy in there. Now, Collins is playing really well in the goals as well. His puck outs have been exceptionally good. So it takes the pressure off your backline as well if the goalie can hit the ball and find his targets up the pitch so you can get set for the next round. You're not caught in a counter-attack all the time. So that has helped also. But Mellerick, I was extremely impressed with him. He did a man-marking job on Sutcliffe. And I watched the game, when I watched it the second time, when the ball was going in, Mellerick just kept looking out the pitch to see where Sutcliffe was. So that means he's coachable. The same way with Luke Meade. Luke Meade, like we slated him last year, he didn't track runners against Tipperary, all that kind of stuff. He was a lovely hurler, right? That's a nice way of saying he's great hands, but he can't work. But he can work now. And in fairness to Kingston and his backroom team, like they've got an all-star backroom team down in Cork. So if they couldn't make it work, it would have been a shame, really, in a lot of ways. They're all now fighting like dogs. O'Connor, like John said there, like if you take any fellow Mark John Mullane, it was as hard to get the ball back out past him as there was to stop him with the ball coming through you. And that's the hallmark of good forwards. They're the first defender when they lose the ball. And it just sets an attitude back across the pitch. And that's what they're doing now. So Cork are well set. The reason I had a tip Kilkenny was that 3 weeks in a row is tough going. To be fair, now Cork had a massive game against Clare. Obviously, the Dublin game, they got 8 points up. They kept ticking over for the last 3 quarters then and kept it at 8 points or so. But Kilkenny are going to bring a fair bit of fight to this one now. So if Cork have it in the legs, I've no doubt they'll be able to run Kilkenny. But that's the question. Do they have it in the legs with 3 weeks in a row? That's the question mark for me.
Lads, I'm not buying into this. Sorry, Brendan. Like this 3-4 weeks in a row. I would have said maybe 10 years ago, back in our time, I would have said, Jay, like, and look, you look at the Cork and the Waterford team, the age profile is with them. Like if these were two teams that were pushing on in age, I would say, well, yeah, maybe the 3-4 weeks in a row is going to catch up on them. But I'm not convinced about. I actually think it's going to play into Waterford and Cork's hands. I think look at the condition that an awful lot of these guys are in. It's just incredible the condition they're in, and you know to get into that condition to play that, to perfect that running game that Cork, Waterford are playing. What are they doing in training? So I don't see the 3 or 4 weeks a problem. I think the condition these lads are in, I think they'll more than manage it. And I think from a Cork point of view, the one problem they have the weekend, and I've seen it myself, he was brilliant sitting in the pocket. He got an amount of the ball the weekend was Mark Coleman. I was at the match, the Dublin Cork game, but Donald Burke picked off 5 points and he could have had another 3. So he could have easily had 8 points from play. So what are Cork going to do the weekend if TJ lands in at number 11? Mark Coleman is not going to be able to sit in the pocket and sit in front of the D. So it's a bit of a headache for Kieran Kingston. What's he going to do? Is he going to move Gerald Mellerick back, or is he going to drop a midfielder back? But that is going to be a big problem. Like Mark Coleman, he's not going to be able to sit back in the pocket if TJ's at number 11, because Donald Burke got on a whirl of ball, hit Mark Coleman for 5 points, and he could have very easily had another 3 or 4, albeit Mark Coleman hit an awful lot of ball.
John, the only thing I would say on that, like if you take it, Waterford when they played Galway, was it 14 points they were up going down the last quarter? And you remember the heart attack that was going on when Galway started scoring a load of goals. They were 8 points up against Tipperary, who were Moria, a leggy team, old and finished, and they got it back to within 2 points and butchered 3 unbelievable goal chances. So, and when I saw Waterford, like it is, I know they're unbelievably conditioned, but look at their last quarter performances the last 2 times. They invest a huge amount of energy in the first 3 quarters of the game, which is they're going at it bald-headed, which is fine. The subs come in and all. But just the evidence of the last 2 games with that Galway and Tipperary game, you give Limerick that kind of opportunity with freshness of legs that will be obviously 4 or 5 times up the notch of Tipperary for legs in the last quarter. It just has an impact. And that's why our game 2 years ago, when they had the 3 games in a row, they changed it, because the sports science was saying the teams were biting off the GPSs in that last quarter. And that is my worry for Waterford in this one. Now, emotion is a big thing, and it might carry them across the line. I hope it does. I'd like to see Waterford get to a final. But it's just the evidence is just stacked slightly on that.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting to see. Obviously, a couple of the other games in the lower tiers at the weekend, Mayo and Offaly put up a massive score against Derry. It was 41 points to 214. I think it's a Croke Park record for points scored, and I think it's a record for final scoring in a final as well. 41 points, I don't think has ever been done, anything like that. John, just a word on Offaly. Obviously, like, it was a kind of a clinical, comprehensive campaign between league and championship, and they're not back exactly where they want to be, but they're one step closer up the ladder anyway.
Yeah, and look, I'm not saying it just because I know Michael Verney, but it's amazing what one man, when going in and taking over the helm there, and becoming chairman. He, with young, fresh ideas. It's no coincidence then they push on and they win the under-20 football. Michael Verney is brought in. Michael Verney they missed out last year. They were probably a bit below par against Down, but this year they've been racking up the scores, putting up big scores, and there seems to be just a big feel Offaly GAA as a whole, and it's fantastic to see. And I think to back up the Joe McDonough, Division 1 hurling is secured. Offaly hurling is going in the right direction, and it's fantastic to see. And I think the sooner the better that they back up and compete in the Lee McCarthy hurling, the better for the whole hurling fraternity as a whole. I think will be massive for the GAA, and I just think it's great to see, and I just think Offaly GAA as a whole, they seem to be in a really, 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 really good place.
Yeah, obviously the McDonald Cup next year, Offaly will be going into that. Antrim will come back down, so that's going to be very competitive. Just Brendan, obviously in the Nicky Rackard as well, Keith Higgins has had a lot of Croke Park heartbreak. Great to see him getting his hands on silverware there, and even Cottle Freeman, I think, who was wing back last year, he went up centre forward and scored 1-3. A massive, massive win for them against Tyrone. Yeah,
it's huge, and it is. It's great, and there's times in the GAA where you have that sentimental look at it and go, God, that's great. Keith Higgins has found his way up the steps of Croke Park. I suppose he may have thought to himself it might be lifting Sam Maguire, but either way, it just shows the dedication of the man. And in these counties, and I've obviously in my involvement with Kerry over a number of years, I've been up in Mayo and played them above in Castlebar and things like that. I know the passion of the outliers, I suppose we call it, in hurling. And Keith Higgins could easily have said, look, I've done my bit in football. Look, I'm just going to put on the slippers now and watch a few games and do a bit of punditry and sit in the fence for a while, right? But no, he has a passion for the GAA, and he has a passion for Mayo hurling. And that'll tell you how strong Mayo hurling is up in the pockets that are playing it up there, and that he decided he was going to go again and put himself out there. And he got his rewards, and fair play to him for putting in the effort that he has. It's a fantastic win for Mayo.
Yeah, well deserved, definitely. Just to mention, for Fermanagh did a big win against Cavan in the Lorimar. Tom Keenan hit 3-2 as well. I think his manager described him as a wee superstar. I think he'd be dining out on that 3-2 for a while there. Lads, it would be remiss of us to not talk about Joe Canning's retirement. Obviously retired last week. I was down in Galway at the time. He was actually at the races the same day he retired. My abiding memory of him, I remember playing a Fitzgibbon Cup match against LIT over in LIT. Real hostile atmosphere. He had a hamstring injury coming into the game, strained it after about 15 minutes and was walking over the sideline. When the ball went over the sideline, he was just about to be taken off. He stayed on to hit the sideline, put the sideline over the bar, and then walked off. A phenomenal talent. Brendan, just your own memories on him. I know you've kind of mentioned it maybe during the week, and you mentioned last night. To try and eyeball him as he was coming through on goal, or to even, like, I presume there was an element of fear almost when you see a lad like that coming at you when you're in the goals, because you just know what he can do.
Yeah, there's an element of, will I just go for the puck and out hurley and get ready for it, because standing here isn't going to make much of a difference if he hits it right. But I said last night, he hits it so early, he hits it so fast. Like Paul Flynn of Waterford was the other guy that had the same kind of wrist set him. John will have known Paul. Just the speed at which the ball goes, it's just different and faster. And there's no doubt the pressure that Joe had on him every time he played. Like if he didn't play well, more often than not, Galway were bet, and most teams knew it. And he took some hardship. If you think of the belt that Paddy Maher hit him out under the stand there in the Hogan stand one day, you know, and it was just like he was being bet around the place most of the time. But for me, the key for Joe was his highlights reel is obviously going to be unbelievable. I said before, his leg could go on for 3 days and you still have enough footage for a couple more. But the way he adapted and came out to play centre forward, he was always pinned against Henry. Can you influence the game like Henry can? You know, and I think for a while he rebelled against it, but then suddenly he decided, right, I'm going to play at 11. And at that day in the All-Ireland final against Waterford, like he pinged over early on a couple of points to settle down the troops. He was hooking, he was blocking, he was working back. He did all the dirty work, I suppose. And that for me was the most impressive part of Joe, on top of the obvious skill that he had, you know. But he's been a fantastic ambassador for the game, and it's a pity to see him go at 32 though. It just shows where the game has gone, that Joe Canning has to pack in now, that I would say has been still relatively young lad.
John, where does he rank among the pantheon of greats for you?
Oh, he's right up there. From the last look, we've been lucky enough. We've witnessed some incredible hurlers in the last 25 years. I definitely haven't. You know, you talk Tommy Welsh, Henry Shefflin, JJ Delaney, the hurlers, Callan. I definitely have him in the top 3 of the last 25 years. And look, he's going to be a name we're going to be talking about. And I said on the radio Saturday, he's going to be a name we're going to be talking about in 60, 70 years' time. And I just feel, I think it's the right call. I'm delighted Joe is doing it. I think he's making the right call. You know, he could hurl on for be a 20, 25 minute man. This year I said, you know, he should have been probably full forward. But then again, you look at the Waterford Galway game and you look at the ball that was going into him, and you had one guy, nearly 2 guys in front of him, and you're kind of saying to yourself, well, Jesus, did the Wexford or did the Galway management help him this year? But then again, I look at the Dublin game, and I think there was one pasture play where he had 3 or 4 yards on a lad, and, you know, a couple of years ago, Joe put the ball over with his eyes closed. I think it was Dara Gray got a hook on him, and I said, you know, maybe that yard is starting to go. And I just think you kind of know, Verney, you know, and when you have it in the back of your mind, will I or won't I go? I think if it's in your mind at all, I think the best thing is to do is to go. And I think Joe was going out on his own terms, you know. And I don't think from what I love about Joe is that I want to remember Joe Cannon for all them great scores. I wouldn't like to see him staying on for another year or two and, you know, another lad get a hook in or a block in and, you know, probably slowing down another small bit. So I think, all in all, I think Joe has made the right call. And I think from a Galway hurling point of view, I think he's put a bit of pressure on the other lads to possibly go the same route and probably step away and leave Galway hurling go in a different direction now. But as Brendan touched on, what a remarkable hurler and an unbelievable hurler. And, you know, he's going to be a big loss to the game, but he's going to be one lad we're going to be talking about in 60, 70 years' time. No doubt about it.
Yeah, I think, John, too, the tipping point for him, I watched the game in Salt Hill, and when he's marking Calum at wing back, he got 3 points and he just streaked away. And I know, talking to a few of the past Tipperary hurlers who have retired, it's the one thing they said, when they couldn't catch the guy going away, he just streaked away from him. It was time to go, and better to go a year too soon than a year too late. So Joe has made good decisions on the pitch, and I'd agree with you. He's made a good decision here, although it is sad to say that he won't be gracing the fields again. But we can remember him starting and finishing matches rather than just coming on for 5 minutes, which is the way we should remember it.
Great stuff. Brendan and John, thanks a million for joining us.
Oh, what a Verney.
Let's turn our attention to football now on the throw-in association with Bord Gáis Energy, and I'm delighted to be joined by Dick Clerkin and Martin Breheny to look back on the Ulster and Leinster finals. Dick, after your native Monaghan went down by a point to Tyrone at the weekend, it must be a case of a lost opportunity for the Farney men.
Aside from all the preamble and everything that's well documented from a purely sporting performance point of view, it was a lost opportunity. And when the dust settles and guys reflect, it's that first half performance just left them. Wouldn't say too much to do. Like, they did get it back, but they had to invest a lot of energy in the second half. But even saying that, wouldn't say dominant that they were in the second half, but Monaghan, that was a game they left back. That was a game they I wouldn't say should have won, but could have won when you consider how, let's be honest, how poor they were in the first half, but equally the missed chances that they also had in the second half right throughout. And it'll hurt. Like, it's yourself from playing, you'll always lose games. Like, only one team goes through a full year every year, that wins it out. So everyone has to suffer and deal with defeat in the winter months. And it's when you don't perform, really gets you. You never mind losing a game if you've put out your best foot forward and you're beaten by a better team. Monaghan just performing, a lot of players didn't perform, and that'll hurt, because if that was a game to be won and an Ulster title to be won that was left behind, would be the sense. Myself anyway, and from talking to a few people already around the country, that would be the sense.
Martin, just from a Tyrone point of view, obviously new management in this year, even though they only had one of the joint managers at the weekend with their own bit of kind of COVID chaos. Taking everything into account, first year in charge for Brian Dooher and Fergal Logan, the guys, the personnel that they had missing at the weekend, it was a fair performance from Tyrone, and obviously it may be a different type of performance, a different type of style maybe than we have been accustomed to over recent years as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's target achieved for their first season, the first target achieved anyway, winning the Ulster title, which is obviously the most competitive of all the provincial championships. So they'll be very pleased with that. And, there's a tendency perhaps to say, well, that's as far as it goes. I'm not so sure about that. I mean, they've worked well, and they're playing a slightly different style. And it was a workmanlike, decent performance. And Dick makes the point there about Monaghan being, perhaps matches that could have left behind them, and inevitably that will happen, I suppose, when a team loses by a point, and that makes it all the more difficult, particularly for Monaghan, who lost Tyrone by a point a few years ago as well. But Tyrone, I suppose, they did the groundwork in the first half, and when Monaghan came back at them, it was still Monaghan had to be foot to the floor more than Tyrone, and the effort and the energy it took to stage that comeback obviously perhaps took its toll. But again, the finest of margins, and you can look at every angle and look at every break and everything like that, and it's just one of those games that unfortunately somebody had to lose. And on this occasion, as indeed it was a few years ago, it was Monaghan's turn, or it was Monaghan again, and they will be disappointed with that. But yeah, job done for Tyrone. Good start, good campaign, and they'll take it from here, and we'll fancy their chances against Kerry. I know everybody is saying, "Oh, well, Kerry will win the All Ireland and all this," but Tyrone will come in nice and steady. They will be a lot better than they were when they play Kerry in the league, that's for sure. So it's by no means a certainty that they won't be in the final.
Dick, do Tyrone come into this in an ideal scenario almost? Having shipped all those goals against Kerry in the league, they probably have a massive point to prove from that league match. There's probably a lot less expectation on them coming into that game. They've been going about their bit, like they've beaten Donegal, albeit maybe a Donegal team that was missing Michael Murphy for the bulk of the game. They've beaten Monaghan. They've won a lot of big games along the way, and they're probably still maybe been underrated.
Yeah, it's exactly how you'd want a team going in, like as I say, and it probably wasn't that well documented. The players that they lost at the last minute, and that's not easy for any team to try and deal with. And the fact that they have it proves how strong their panel is, that they were able to sort of slot in players and didn't seem to really take away from the overall. So the fact that they got through the Monaghan game, having to suffer that, they'll all be back in all likelihood, and don't seem to see that there's any injury worries. So they're coming in under sort of very little expectation, even I'd say up around their own county. Tyrone, Kerry rivalry doesn't need any introduction. You'd imagine that they add a bit of spice into it. In fairness to them, Tyrone, in terms of gamesmanship and sportsmanship, you could have asked for better of them. From on, and that's not something we've always seen. Whether that was just for that game, considering everything happened, I find it hard to believe that they're just going to walk up against Kerry knowing that they literally have to get everything out of themselves and try and bring Kerry back to them some way to try and make it competitive. So I expect Tyrone to add a wee bit more spice at the semi-final and try and upset and frustrate that Kerry forward line, because it's a very different challenge than what Monaghan posed from an attacking point of view in the semi-final.
Dick, just a word on Matty Donnelly the other day. I know Darren McCurry maybe has been stealing the headlines, and obviously he's had an unbelievable season so far. But Matty Donnelly, I suppose, who had a kind of a career-threatening hamstring injury a couple of years ago. He's back at his very best, and I know he said after the game that he's happy just to be pitching in and helping out other lads in the full forward line. But he was back to his very best the other day.
He was, but it was interesting the role he played. Like, was it last year that Tyrone went down? Was it against Donegal, I think, and maybe a semi-final in Ulster, and he was playing like a sweeper role or a very withdrawn defensive role, tracking and offered very little forward threat. Whereas look at this year, he was plunked in at number 14 and by and large played a fairly traditional 14 role in the modern game, whatever that might be. Was an outlet, physically strong, he's next to near impossible to dispossess because of his strength and turn of pace off both feet. Chipped in with a few excellent points, so he's a really good outlet. But it's all well and good playing good full forward. You've got to have the supply. You've got to have a team willing to look forward and drop the ball in. And Tyrone crucially have done that this year, which other teams don't. Yeah, they play good men in the square, but they don't kick the ball in. I would argue that's where Monaghan fell down. Monaghan had equally as good a man inside and didn't let speculative ball in that Tyrone did. Matty's benefiting, McCurry's benefiting, and McShane, who's coming back to his milk, will benefit from that if they continue the way that they're going. But yes, he maybe doesn't have the legs that he had with suffering from that injury, and maybe that takes a while to come back. So deploying him on the edge of the square is a good tactic from Dougal and Logan.
I think that dummy solo definitely highlighted a lad that's fairly full of confidence anyway, and that semi-final against Kerry is going to be really, really interesting in 2 weeks' time. Just looking at the Leinster final, Martin, you were obviously in there in Croke Park yesterday. I don't know, it's probably one of the few times in recent years where you could say that Dublin maybe are kind of stuttering to a Leinster title. I think it was the lowest winning margin since 2013. It was the first time since 2005 that they haven't scored a goal in a Leinster final. They're still getting the job done. They still maybe the aura of invincibility that we talked about over the last, on route to 6 in a row isn't there, but they are still getting the job done. It has to be said.
Yeah, and I mean, let's be realistic about it. There was never a doubt yesterday about who was going to win. I mean, as the game progressed, anytime I think Colin Keys made the point in the paper this morning that every time Kildare scored, Dublin got the next score. So you never felt that Kildare were actually going to win it. I think the one thing there was still a chance for Kildare to test Dublin more. And what was really frustrating for Kildare supporters was the number of chances they missed in the first half in particular. They missed a free area on to put them 2-1 ahead. And then I think there were 3, if not 4, high balls lobbed into the goalkeeper's hands, and that is so frustrating. It sets the opposition up, and no better opposition than Dublin to be set up from that sort of situation. At least it was kicked dead. It would put some pressure on the restart, perhaps. But so Kildare had those chances. They didn't take them, and you've got to take them against Dublin to really push it on. And even when they got the goal, they again, it was as if Dublin just lifted it again. So. Yeah, I mean, everybody's saying, well, where are Dublin and have they gone back? And perhaps they have, but now it starts. Now they were always going to win Leinster. Okay, they didn't win it by the runaway margins that we've seen over many years, but there's still an awful lot going for them. And I personally cannot understand why they're not favourites for the All Ireland. I mean, a team that hasn't lost 44 games now, going back to 2015, and there's a view that a Kerry team that lost to a team just out of Division 3 last year, that they're the favourites. I don't quite understand that, but no, I think Dublin. They certainly need. They will have to raise it more. There's no doubt about that. Mayo will be a lot better than anything they've played so far, but. The potential, the capacity is there. We've seen it before, and whether it's enough to win or not, I don't know. But they'll certainly be a lot better, I would think, in the next outing.
Dick, how vulnerable do you think the Dubs are?
Not very. You have to be relative here. In terms of, it is going to take an extremely good team to beat them, right? Irrespective, and that's so. It's really and has been the case over the last number of years. Any team at the top. Even Dublin, maybe they're a wee bit back on their high levels of consistency. They're still a very, very good team. So it is going to take a very, very good team plus one to beat them. So the challenge is to Mayo first, and then likely a Kerry to come up to that level on that one day. So it's really down to me. I don't expect Dublin to come back any further than they have. There'll still be a 20 points team in Croke Park. That's their level, and they've proven that, and they don't need to prove that anymore. So it's really now, well, can you see Mayo hitting Dublin for 20 points in a semi-final and having the staying power to get into the 75th, 76th minute? Because that's where it'll come down to. That's the fine margins that Dublin time and again have been better. They don't have to be better than teams at semi-final and all-Ireland final by 5, 10, 20 points. This measure that we're looking and comparing them back at Leinster, as Martin said, that's gone. We forget about Leinster. The margins don't matter. They just need to be 1 point better than Mayo, 1 point better than Kerry. And there's nothing to say that they won't be, because they're still an excellent team. The interesting thing from yesterday I took from was the reintroduction or the reappearance of the likes of Owen Murchan, John Small, these guys who add that pace and a wee bit of X factor to what at other times can be quite a vanilla team in terms of how they play and move. So if they can get, Small just got a bit of a knock on the head. He tweaked his hamstring. They can get another 2 weeks behind them. Like, those two players alone add an awful lot to that Dublin team than what we've seen so far in Leinster. So, as I say, they're probably in a good enough position as well when you talk about Tyrone and that. They're probably on an upward trajectory because everyone has them down so low, but they're now getting better than what we've seen so far. So, listen, I expect them, to put up a big performance against Mayo, but at the end of the day, it's up to Mayo to try and bring it. Don't expect Dublin to come back any further and give them a handy semi-final win. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I think Dessie Farrell said afterwards that Robbie McDade will probably come into the equation as well for the All-Ireland semi-final too. So that's another one of their frontliners back. Martin, just a word on Kildare. Like, most of the spotlight is going to be on Dublin, and maybe the gap not been as big as before. Do you think, like, with Division 1 secured, a Leinster final place, I think they conceded 2 goals throughout league and championship this year, having conceded 5 and 1/2 against Meath last year in the semi-final. Have they put some of the building blocks in place to potentially close that gap to Dublin and Leinster, and at least leave themselves in that position where they're going to be fighting at the top table in Division 1 next year, and they have the opportunity, I suppose, to grow a bit over the next couple of years?
Well, statistically, the year was a success, but winning promotion to Division 1 this year, it was a strange league. Now, let's be fair, it was a 3-round league and a final then, and they could have ended up playing, for instance, playing Mayo. It was just the narrow margins that got them into the. But yeah, they got into Division 1. I think they'll find it pretty hard in Division 1, I have to say, and they were quite lucky to be in the Leinster final. Westmeath had a notion of chances late on in the semi-final, didn't take them. So, look, there's always a positive air around with a team that improved on the year before, when statistically speaking, anyway, that they're better than they were last year. It's about, but I wouldn't feel that they're ready to make any big push in closing the gap with Dublin just yet. I mean, I really wouldn't. I thought it was an average enough performance by them. They didn't really test Dublin. I mean, you just wonder how much more was in Dublin if they had to. If Kildare got a second goal, for instance, you still felt Dublin would press on, and that was the feeling all through. And it looked to some degree, perhaps, if Kildare were in a containing mode, and the last thing they wanted was, and naturally and understandably, not to be beaten by 12, 15, 20 points, as happened before for teams in Leinster and need to Kildare too. So, it's a work in progress. The results suggest they're better, and that will raise confidence, and that's what it's all about. But I wouldn't be just saying there's any great lily white big flourish on the way just yet.
Just a quick word, Dick. We've kind of briefly looked at the All-Ireland semi-finals. We won't really be chatting football on the throw-in until probably after the first All-Ireland semi-final. Just looking at Tyrone and Kerry, like, who do you like? What do you see there? Tyrone are coming in probably as underdogs. Probably have a good few questions to answer after that league game. But how do you see that game going, and even just in the Dublin Mayo game as well? A lot of people are saying that this is the year for Mayo to beat Dublin and then somehow lose an All-Ireland final again. But how do you see those two All-Ireland semi-finals going?
Yeah, Tyrone, it'd be interesting to see Ty. I have to say I was very impressed with the way Tyrone sort of approached the Monaghan game and the way they deployed Niall Morgan. Like, that takes a lot of courage from a management
fortitude.
I wasn't going to use the other word, is bit past the watershed. But like, you know, to come up with something like that on a day like that, and it could go horribly wrong, but it went perfectly right. Can they come up with something novel for the Kerry team? Like, they're going to have to try and find a way to really sort of stamp out and basically suffocate the space for that Kerry. So I don't think it's going to be particularly pleasant. I think they'll recognise that if they go out man for man, in all likelihood, you could see a likely repeat of what happened down in Killarney. So I think it'll be quite a tight, sticky game and try and play them on the break and hit them in pace. Leaving Matty Donnelly and McCurry inside, because I say they'll know that there's scores in there that they can't keep. They're not going to. Tyrone can't think they can beat Kerry by just suppressing their attack. They're going to have to score 16 points plus. So they're going to have to try and fast break, long ball, and see can the guys do damage. Like, I'd say Matty Donnelly would fancy his chances against that Kerry full back line if he can get quick one-on-one ball, because physically he's all there and he'd be able to take his man on. So tight defence, fast break, long ball from Tyrone. In terms of Mayo Dublin, it's all about pace for Mayo. They'll have to be sort of thinking that is Dublin's legs going a wee bit, and they're just tired as the years of dominance slowly catching up with them, because they haven't shown that pace and energy that we know. So they're just going to have to run at them. I'd say James Horn says, listen, that's every chance you get, break the line, run that wee bit better than Kildare were able to do. Kildare and Fairness tried yesterday. Mark, I know what you're saying in terms of Kildare. They competed. They just didn't have enough confidence in terms of trying to break that line from the middle third. I expect Mayo, Oisin Mullen, Paddy Durk and Lee Keegan, wherever they can get energy from, break the line over the top and just try and run Dublin down and see can Dublin lift the energy levels, because they have to. Dublin will need more energy than they've seen, otherwise the Mayo runners will get in behind them, and whether they can finish those chances that they'll create will determine where that game will go.
Call your All-Ireland final pairing, Dick, please.
I'm going Kerry Mayo. Yeah, I think Dublin are, they're there to be beaten, and I think Mayo really have a chance. These young guys, like, they've got serious pace, and maybe there's a wee bit of devil may care attitude about them that maybe previous generations didn't have. No baggage, just go for it, and they'll be a wee bit better than they were last year. And I think no, it could be totally proven wrong, and Dublin are just pacing themselves for a big semi-final. But again, based on how they've performed so far, I guess 3 games in the bounce. They haven't done that in 10 years, really, or back to everything started. So based on their form, you have to say that there's just something missing there that they have to prove that it's not there. If they can't come up to the level that they know they can, it's a game that Mayo can win.
Same question for you, Martin. All-Ireland final pairing and white.
Dublin and Kerry. I think if Mayo played as they did in the first half against Galway, against a limited enough Galway team, and if they did that against Dublin, and they'd be in serious trouble. I think they haven't beaten Dublin in league or championship since 2012, and until such time as they do, I'd have to stay with Dublin, because I just think there obviously are more doubts about Mayo. I think Kerry will win the other side. But again, it's certainly not the foregone conclusion people might think. So I think it'll be Dublin Kerry, and you know what? I think the 7 in a row is on for Dublin.
An exciting few weeks ahead, lads. Dick and Martin, thanks a million for joining us.
Cheers, folks. Take care.
That's all we've got time for in this week's episode of The Throw-In in association with Bord Gosh Energy. Don't forget to rate, review and follow the show on Apple, Spotify or wherever you get your podcast from. And we'll be back next Monday for more GAA discussion.
Bord Gosh Energy, proud sponsors of the GAA All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship and GAA Legends Tour Series of Croke Park. #hurling to the core.